Greetings, everyone. A tiny bit later than originally planned, but thank you for joining me today for another installment of Banter with Barker. And today, I, Christian Barker, have joining me an old friend of mine, name of Suzanne Wong. Suzanne is one of the leading watch commentators, writers, and editors on Earth. For many years now has been carving out quite a niche for herself with her frank and informed commentary on the subject of watchmaking, the watch industry, and watches in general. And today, Suzanne is actually, appropriately enough, joining us from the 11th installment of the Geneva Watch Auctions in Geneva, unsurprisingly. And Suzanne, I see, has just joined us, and she'll be coming aboard in just a moment. Let me authorize that. All right. Here she is, Suzanne Wong. And I have special news, because the reason that we're a little bit late today with Suzanne Wong.
Yeah, a little bit late. I don't know if Christian shared with you, but I had a few logistical problems leaving the house, shall we say.
With the people out there, why we're a little bit tardy today, or you want to keep it on the down low?
Yeah, it's because it's personal. So
Okay.
Well, anyway, it's my birthday.
It's not personal. You're making it sound like it's a heavier thing.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's my birthday, and
it's
my birthday, and there were a few unexpected surprises this morning, which were not accounted for when I set up this little live session. But anyway, eventually got out of the house. Oh, hey Joel, how's it going? We're in. I don't know if you can see. Well, I mean, the lighting's not ideal, but we're at La Reserve in Geneva, just close to the lake, one of the most exclusive hotels and resorts and spas in this amazing city.
Yes.
And I'm currently looking through the watch auction catalog of Phillips auctions, which has very rapidly in the last few years made an enormous name for itself as probably the most significant and influential auction house when it comes to watches, actually. And because we live in COVID times, you can see that all the viewing tables are kind of super plexiglassed up and one-to-one. Normally, you'd have kind of an open situation where you can come in and out, apart from obviously some security screening at the beginning, at the entrance, and the showcases of watches kind of all around the room. There'd be rows of chairs or like big sofas during the preview period, which is now, and later during the auction there'd be rows of chairs, of course. But no, in light of the situation in COVID, we have these regulations. And when I came in, not only was I screened for security, I had to leave my name, my contact details. So I'm assuming this is in age of contact tracing, which is one of the best methods that we have, actually. We have this little information sheet. We got in and gave me exactly.
The information sheet that they've got there.
Come again, sorry?
The information sheet that you've got there, it looks very child-friendly.
It is. I mean, it's pretty idiot-proof. I guess they designed it so that it could be understood even if you're illiterate, which, you know, it's helpful because you never know. I got like a new pen all wrapped up, so that's new. They gave a new loop as well, because normally they'd be kind of like just open loops, just like kind of lying around, and catalogs as well would be just available on every table, like you could just refer to them. And no, now we have personal copies of these catalogs. We have pre-wrapped pens, pre-wrapped loops, the instructions, as I said, and neat little bag to carry it all in.
All looks super safe. Is this the first one of these sorts of things you've been to, Suzanne, since the whole situation? Obviously, you know, SAHH went digital, Basel went south. Have you been thinking of this nature over the last sort of 90 days that we've been coming to terms with the COVID-19 crisis?
No, well, I mean, honestly, the situation in Singapore is things have just started opening up again, right?
Yeah.
So And in Switzerland, for whatever reason, I think we've been quite lucky. Apparently, the official count of coronavirus, the COVID cases are really, really low, like 30 a day or something like that. And it's actually really surprising and astounding to me as someone who's obviously lived in Singapore most of my life, and you
Mm.
know we've been through other pandemics like we've been through the SARS crisis, we've been through H1N1, and
Yeah.
always there was always more erring on the side of caution, I would say.
Yeah.
And in Switzerland, or at least in Geneva, where I am, things are pretty much back to normal. People are walking around. It's almost kind of back to normal. Like, and when I say normal, I mean like pre-COVID times. And
Mm.
it's a bit startling to someone like myself. But I mean, it seems to be holding out so far. Fingers crossed. And anyway, the situation here is that everyone's still taking precautions when it comes to big gatherings of people and things like that. So, fingers
Are you
crossed, everything.
masking up for these things?
I do when I go to crowded places, when I'm on public transport, especially,
Mm.
because the traffic in Geneva is notoriously bad, and it hasn't improved, I have to say, because they shut down some of the lanes on the roads to close them up for bike lanes, because I think they're trying to encourage that now.
Yeah.
And now that people are driving again, and the city is filling up again, the traffic's actually become worse. I didn't think that was possible.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so if
Yeah.
I'm going to be spending a lot of time on the bus because of the traffic, it's just better to get
Yeah.
masked up and have something on. You never know.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about nicer things. So obviously, it'd be great to chat a little bit about where you are today for the 11th Phillips Geneva Watch Auction. What's on your shopping list, or would be in an ideal world if in ideal economic conditions, shall we say?
Oh, hey, Sumit, just try taste a bit.
Hey, Sylvia.
Um, okay. Well, it is my birthday today, but I'm not going crazy. I'm
Yeah.
not like buying any
Never
vintage
know.
watches
There
today.
might be a benevolent person out there who's gonna be from your lips to the ears of the Lord, and you never know, something might land on your doorstep tomorrow. So the sky's the limit. What are you interested in there?
That's a good point. Well, I have to say, like, I've literally just flipped open the catalog, and there's some real doozies right here. I'm gonna try and turn this camera around. Let's see if this works. All right. And literally, the first page I turned to is a beautiful Harry Bootleinen piece. Now, everyone knows I'm a big fan of Bootleinen. He's one of the most talented and significant watchmakers to be still maintaining an independent workshop today. And this is his 28 or 28 in English. Uh, it's one of the watches that kind of is his. It's a mainstay of his repertoire, let's say.
Hmm.
And everyone who's a fan of independent modern watchmaking knows the name Voutilainen and knows Carrie, and knows the kind of stuff that goes on back there. I mean, look at that. It says unique piece.
Mm.
You can see it says unique piece. So obviously, all this engraving, it's hand done, and I believe I know by who. It's by the artisan Eddie Jacquet. Let's see. Yeah, there you go, right there.
All
This
right,
particular
good
hand
spot.
engraving is done by Eddie Jacquet. It's totally his style. He does all these really sort of mythical, really sort of high classical kind of deep relief engraving, and it's really beautiful. I mean, when you say that it's a work of art, it kind of really is. I don't know
Mm.
exactly what it's depicting, but it looks like mermaids and Poseidon and something really sort of stuff of legends, basically. And
Mm.
when you open the cuvette, which is kind of like a little lid on the back of an engraved watch, you see the movement, which is, again, like a work of art of its own. I love his
Suzanne,
stuff.
I think your hand is just sometimes going over the microphone. Maybe we're losing a little bit of audio from you.
Okay. I think it may be my hair.
Yeah.
People have said that before about I'm going to try and adjust that. And let me know if this is any better.
Okay.
Okay.
No
So, oh,
worries.
I noticed Hind Siddiq has just joined. Hi, Hind. Long time no see. I miss all of you in Dubai. And flip over the next page, and hey, what you got? It's the Opus 3 by Harry Winston. I don't know if you remember, Christian, but because me and Christian, we used to work together in the past,
We
like
did indeed.
way
I
we
can't
did.
remember.
Well, I joined Revolution in 2010, and you were already there. You've been there for like 3 years or something before me. When you
Yeah,
joined in 2008, I think.
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I tipped off at the end of 2011, so I guess it was yeah, kind of a 2 year period or thereabouts.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's Sumit saying? What's Suzanne Blair Wong project? Ah, right, it's because of the shaky. Oh, thanks, Sumit. Thanks. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
We're not
Comparing
looking
me
up.
to a horror movie.
I don't know.
But yeah,
So rude.
essentially, coming back to the watch, I just wanted to say that this is a watch that we saw in the office a few times.
Okay.
You know, it's part of the Harry Winston Opus collection, which is something when Max Buser, a friend of ours, actually Christian,
Cool.
was still kind of in charge of Harry Winston timepieces, and he conceived this project to involve uh, independent watchmakers and like sort of designers and constructors, and kind of really showcase them in a way that hadn't been done before in the industry. And
Mm.
it was called the Opus Project. And number three was the work of a watchmaker called Vianney Halter, who kind of, I would say, pioneered the whole steampunk aesthetic in watchmaking. I'll just show you another one of his timepieces because it's right on the next page, actually. Um, there you go.
Okay.
That's the Vianney Halter Classic, and it's not the first classic, because this is kind of like a re-edition of sorts to kind of remind us of how we used to love it. But the original series was really a groundbreaker at the time. But yeah, I
And
have
just,
got my eye on quite a few things here,
I,
but
I, I,
unfortunately, all out of my range. Yes.
well, but you never know. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who's going to watch this back on the recording and go, Suzanne deserves to have that in her collection. So you just don't know what's going to happen. But
Fair
prior to
enough.
us starting to work together, a good decade plus ago and getting to know one another,
Oh my
what was
God, it really was ages.
your into this world that is now, so much a big part of your life, and that you're, so passionate about watchmaking? Because it was kind of a gradual progression for you, wasn't it?
It was. I would actually say it was, because I didn't start off with an interest in watches. I wasn't passionate about watches in my youth. I didn't really have a family that was into that kind of thing, as most people, that's how most people get into it. Most enthusiasts and most collectors now, they saw their fathers or their grandfathers really kind of into this whole thing. They had amazing collections of their own. They kind of grew up around this stuff. For me, it was really kind of, it was a professional introduction into this world, because
Hmm.
I was writing for a lifestyle magazine in Singapore. It's like sort of general luxury lifestyle. So cars, watches, of course, but also, travel, dining, yes, boats, like whatever you name it. Okay, it's
Yeah,
just like general luxury lifestyle.
the luxury
And then,
life.
yeah, that general catch-all category. And
Hmm.
then when when I joined, their dedicated watch writer had actually just left, and they didn't have anyone to take over. So they were kind of panicking a bit, and they said, "Oh my God, who's going to do watches? We don't want to do it. Like
Hmm.
the new girl, let's make her do it." So the new girl was me. And
Yeah.
literally at the time, I knew zero things about watches. I've told this story before, but I really knew nothing about watches. Knowing that there was a difference between a mechanical watch and a quartz watch, that was kind of a huge step for me. So that will tell you how much I really knew about watches at the time. I mean, I had a watch, I had a Swatch, that I kind of wore. And then after like high school, I was about 14, I lost my Swatch on a bus, and I just never wore one ever again,
Hmm.
because I don't know why, I just never did. And then obviously I got into it, and I'm that kind of type A personality where if I'm doing something, I've got to do it like really well. Otherwise, it just drives me nuts. I can't do something without absolutely taking it to the top and actually, having it of a certain quality. That's just who I am. Like, it drives some people nuts. I know it drove my team nuts when I was at Revolution, because I wouldn't ever let go any of my copy. I'd just be like, no, it's just like, I just need to revise that last sentence, or I need to revise that last paragraph, or I just need to wait for one last quote, or it's just not where I want it. And it would drive them crazy, because obviously we had deadlines, and it drove our bosses crazy too at the time. But some people deserve to be driven crazy. I don't know.
I think in watch writing, it's one field where you need to be incredibly particular. I often go back with my own, which I think is generally my watch writing is a lot less technical than yours or some of our friends at Revolution and things. But I still will frequently have little tiny things that are changed by the sub editors, and I have to go
Yeah.
back. No, just by making that tiny change. No, we can't have that. That's got to
No,
be.
absolutely. And the thing is, we had really good, I feel like we had really good subs. We didn't appreciate them when we had them, because I have no subs now. And
Right.
I'm happy to do all the subbing myself. And I'm not going to lie, it's a pain in the ass. You know what it's like, Christian, when you've got a good sub in the house, you kind of hang on to them. But you're right,
Absolutely.
a bad sub can just create a whole lot more work than they
I'm not
actually help
saying
with.
just it's an incredibly it's a technical field of writing that
It is. It's underappreciated, I feel.
yeah. So speaking of for
Mm-hmm.
the last how long has it been now that you've been editor-in-chief of WorldTempus, and how are you finding life there in the editor-in-chief seat at the helm running the show?
WorldTempus is an extremely different animal from my previous place, which was Revolution.
Hmm.
First of all, it's fully online, and whereas Revolution was always more of a print heavy kind of media title,
Hmm.
and it's bilingual. So all of our content is equally published in English and in French, and that's taken some getting used to, I can tell you, because
Hmm.
I I mean, I would not say by any stretch I'm fluent in French. I can read French, I can understand French when it's spoken at me and when I'm actually paying attention and when I'm not tired or drunk or any of those things. But having to read articles in French, especially watch articles, and especially if they're technical articles, can take a bit of a strain. So I write in English, obviously, and that gets translated, but then I have to go through it, and I have to go through all the other articles that are written as well. Sometimes I have to do some of the translation. And so first of all, it's a whole different ball game. And
Hmm.
second of all, compared to the other companies that I've worked with in the past, the audience of WorldTempus is just it's monstrous. We had it's God. I used to know this number off the top of my head, but I haven't been like thinking about it as much in the past. So we have something like 3 million unique page views per month and 250,000 unique visitors, something like that.
Hmm.
So, I mean, just the scale of our audience is something else. So I've kind of had to adjust my tack a bit, because writing intensely technical 12-page articles in a print magazine that's predominantly distributed to enthusiasts and people who really are deep into watches like that, It's
Yeah.
very different from writing to an audience of 3 million per month and that reads in 2 languages and is, more of a lifestyle kind of audience. So I've definitely had to kind of expand myself in that area and broaden my approach quite a lot. And it's been good. It's been a learning experience.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
someone
No
just
doubt.
walked past. The guy who runs the Watches TV, Mark Andre. That's true. I don't know if you guys follow the Watches TV, but you definitely should, because they create amazing videos about the latest watches that come out in Switzerland in our industry. And their videos are just amazing. They cover just about everything from A to Z.
Well, your own
And
video have quite a following, Suzanne. Have you been doing much in the way of video interviews and video content of late?
I actually have been, okay, because one of the advantages about being stuck in Geneva during the coronavirus lockdown, obviously,
Hmm.
is that this is where it all is. Like, we're stuck here. So is everyone else in the industry. And I've had the chance to speak to people who normally, during the watch fairs and whatever, would only maybe have 10 minutes or 15 minutes of their time to give to you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
here, as long as we take all the proper precautions, we disinfect ourselves, we, put like hydroalcoholic gel on our hands, we wear masks when we have to, and then we're on camera, we take it off and we remain that distance, and then we can talk face to face, because it's completely different from having a session on Skype or on Zoom. And I'm sure you've experienced this before, especially Christian, because now that everything's kind of moved to teleconferencing and all that, you do miss that face-to-face interaction.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah. Have you had any like weird or awkward, like, some of those Zoom situations that go viral? Have you had any experiences of that of your own?
Fortunately, no one taking me into the bathroom or any of that nature, nor have I made touch wood, looking around for wood, touch wood, any of those mistakes as of yet. But well, look, in these conversations that you're having, it's really, I think there are very few industries that are not suffering at the moment, unless you're selling hand sanitizer, masks, medical care, and maybe toilet paper or instant noodles and rice.
Amazon's
Yeah,
on the up and up.
of course, Amazon, Zoom, etc., are doing well, but everyone else is suffering, and it's a knock-on effect. And we've started to see some of the numbers be released of I think I was reading the other day that year on year, watch exports from Switzerland were down kind of 70 or 80% in April and May. Major numbers. What do you hear from the industry in general about what the future looks like, or how they're predicting that the next 12, 24 months are really are going to go?
Well, I wouldn't say I have my ears to the ground, or I could tell you what's going to happen next year, but I do speak to a few people here and there. And obviously one of the big markets that's been suffering for a long time, even before the COVID situation, was Hong Kong. And kind of Hong Kong's been in trouble for, it's had its own kind of political situation for a while now, and that has definitely impacted the watchmaking exports, shall we say. I think there was this number being thrown around that sales in Hong Kong had dropped by a precipitous 70 to 80%, and that's an insane amount when you talk about a market with the kind of volume that Hong Kong used to push. Because, I mean, although Hong Kong is just a tiny little island, you have to remember that they were selling to the Chinese market as well for tax reasons, because there's an enormous luxury levy, like a tax in China, and the big buyers wouldn't necessarily buy there. They'd buy in Hong Kong, or they'd come directly to Europe and buy here. And obviously, sorry, I just had a call come in at the same time. But obviously, the Chinese couldn't go to Hong Kong to buy. And then after COVID started, they couldn't leave their country to buy. So that kind of had a really depressing kind of effect on sales. We have seen some bounce back in China. I've been speaking to some people at some of the bigger groups that have been traditionally very strong in China, and they have been seeing good results actually ever since the reopening of their boutiques, good sales, and not just like just your standard like regular basic entry level kind of timepieces, but high end, high complication timepieces. So people are still interested in buying. They just need the opportunity to do so. And you'll know this for sure, but in South Korea, for example, luxury retailers and brands have actually been increasing their prices. I don't know what this is in anticipation of, but Chanel pushed up their prices in Korea, I think about 30%. And obviously once Chanel does that, everyone kind of follows because, because they think this is how it's going to be. And then because of the price increase, people observe this, buyers observe this, and you think, I better get in there before prices increase further. So that's kind of stimulated like a little market, situation all of its own. And I genuinely feel that in terms of the global situation, as long as the US is still kind of in trouble, politically, economically, in terms of the COVID situation, as long as the US is still in trouble, the world economies won't really come back the way it used to be, until they get their stuff sorted out. But who knows when that'll be. It might be a while. We might have to wait until the next election cycle even. I mean, or at least until this one's over and people can kind of foresee a more stable kind of situation. People start to have, global investors start to have a bit more faith in the stability of in the US and the market and the general situation over there. We don't know, but that's my feeling. I did speak to a close friend of mine who's a US retailer the other day, and he did say that he's cautiously optimistic, but obviously the situation changes from day to day. So take that, your mileage may vary, as they say. Christian, do you kind of have a finger on the pulse of what goes on in Australia at the moment? Are you still like heavily in touch with people there? Because that's kind of one of the luxury markets that was really on the up and up that people were really excited about. I do know that a lot of local retailers in Singapore were extremely excited about Australia and kind of re-diverting a lot of their efforts towards developing the customer, their clientele, the awareness in Australia at the moment, because as a watch market, it's not as well penetrated as it should be.
Okay. I from what I understand of Australia is, as you say, it's certainly developing, and I know 10 years ago, 20 years ago, most Australian guys, and I think this is still true of most Australian guys, and guys are the majority of hardcore watch collectors. If you've got a discretionary $20,000 to spend, there are a lot of fun things that you can buy with that $20,000. You can buy a boat. You can buy a pretty cool little car to drive around on the weekends. And there are a lot of things that they would perhaps prefer to spend their cash on, or a holiday. Putting it into various other forms of investment. I think now that watches are being seen as an investment class, a great investment, and I think that goes to show exactly where you're sitting today. A lot of people who will be buying lots that are on offer there are not getting them because they're passionate about timepieces. They're buying them because they know that it will appreciate a certain amount over a certain period of time. So I think Australia's kind of the same. Maybe in that area at the high end, it could be seen as a great investment and something that's a really mobile investment that you can move around quickly. But then in the general market, what I'm seeing is more of opening up for, I would say, brands like Tag Heuer, Breitling, where it's kind of $5,000 expenditure, maybe something where you a nice bonus at the end of the year and head down to the Tag Heuer shop and So I that's where it is really.
That was kind of my take on it. That because obviously the luxury aesthetic in Australia, it's kind of more biased towards the lifestyle, the outdoors kind of segment, which is why traditionally speaking, the top performing watch brands in Australia have been those that offer that particular kind of watch, like Rolex, Tag Heuer, maybe a Longines, or like what you were mentioning, you get a nice bonus, you go into the shop, you drop like $3,000, $5,000 on a nice tag, and that's kind of it for you. But
and you don't need anything else. Maybe you've got that, you've got your grandfather's watch, or you've got one formal watch and one sports watch. I think it's just not the Australian mindset is not about, it's very different to Singapore where, as you know, every taxi driver in Singapore wears a Rolex. There's a Rolex.
I mean, there's some debate as to, I was just the debate is whether that Rolex is genuine or not.
They look pretty real to me. I don't know, from the back seat, but
they're not imaginary.
Yeah. Or I often give the example of my personal trainer that I had a few years ago. He was a very young guy, and one day he'd come in with a Daytona, the next day he'd come in with a Panerai, the next day, he had a pretty impressive collection for a sort of.
No, that's true. I gotta say, the guy who cut my hair in Singapore, he was a big watch fan. He had a Jaeger LeCoultre, he had a Louis Vuitton, he had a Rolex, definitely. He also had a Panerai.
Yeah.
He had a whole set, and he had an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak as well. And that was just like how much does this guy make cutting hair?
No, but
I mean,
I think the explanation for that is in Singapore is that you've got people living with their parents until they're a lot older than, you know, I in Australia moved out of home at the age of 18 and I couldn't wait to get out of home. Whereas I guess in Singapore, if you're living with your parents until you're 30 plus and getting married, and also there's the fact that a Mitsubishi or a Toyota Corolla or whatever in Singapore is going to cost you $100,000, and you can
yeah.
get much more status symbolism out of spending that kind of money on a couple of watches, and you're able to save more money because you're living with mum and dad. Then okay, that's there. But yeah, so I don't know. Australia, there's definitely potential, but certainly more for the not for
Yeah.
the $100,000 and above sort of
No,
range. Of,
I mean not in a general kind of sense. Definitely not like what Singapore has been looking at for a long time. But then you have to remember that Singapore is an extremely mature watch market, and I feel like well, we both know the head of retailer, the Hourglass, Michael Tay, and he's one person I know of who's extremely bullish about Australia and the capacity of Australian buyers to really appreciate high-end watchmaking, even at a super high refined level. And he's someone I respect as a super smart guy who has always made the right choice. Even in hindsight, when you look back and you say, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. People should have done this or done that during particular crises. And Mike's one of those guys who's always kind of made the right choice, I feel.
the Australian attitude is not about flashing your cash and showing off your wealth. You will meet extremely wealthy Australian people. You know, a year and a half ago, I interviewed the second wealthiest man in the country, biggest property developer in Australia, multi-billionaire, and he had on, you know, a very old, beaten up Omega that looked about 30 years old that his wife had probably given to him as a gift to some application. And he was there saying, you know, I wouldn't, yeah, I asked him whether, no, that's not something I'm going to spend money on.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. Are they, because like that kind of spending, you don't necessarily associate with like the richest people in the country, because when you speak to extremely wealthy individuals, they're not necessarily those, especially those in prominent positions, they're not necessarily those who splash out as well. I think they're generally quite a frugal lot, or they project that frugal kind of exterior anyway. But
Sure.
the people who are spending like 6 figures, 7 figures on a watch, they're definitely not public figures, unless they're dictators of third world countries.
Of former Soviet countries as well, I believe.
Yeah. You may remember this story a few years ago. I think you were still in Singapore. No, I can't remember if you were still with the rake or you'd kind of moved on to your own project by that time. But there was a story like kind of going viral about an Indonesian general, like a member of the military junta, that was snapped wearing a t-shirt mille. And obviously that's kind of that's an expensive piece of kit. And he had to do like a whole press conference and like give a speech about how, like, of course, you know, there's no implication at all that he's like taking money under the table, because he would never be able to afford a watch like that. It's not a bribe, it's not a gift. In fact, it's a fake. And he took off his watch and like flung it against the wall to prove that, you know, it's not the real thing. And of course, the funny part is that that's one of the most famous marketing, I wouldn't say it's a gimmick, but it's one of the most famous marketing shticks of Christian Mille, that, you know, it's an expensive watch and super, like 6 figures, but you can throw it against a wall, you can throw it against on the ground, it's super resistant, and it stands up to whatever you want to throw it at or at it. And that was just kind of funny to us at the time, that here's this guy
Indeed.
trying to prove that his this illegitimately acquired watch was not what it implied.
No, he bought it at a market stall in Bangkok. Bangkok.
Exactly. So
Yes.
there was that. But anyway, kind of returning to, because we kind of got off track a bit. But I do feel like the people in legitimately high profile, billionaire kind of positions wouldn't necessarily be flaunting, or maybe they're just naturally quite frugal anyway.
Mm. Yeah.
And like rich people you see wearing expensive watches, they're not generally photographed like going like that, like check out my watch. It's because like, you know, they're going down the street and they've been snapped or whatever. And when you look at pictures of Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, or how do you pronounce his name? Bezos, the Amazon
I
guy.
yeah.
No
Well,
idea.
I'd say Bezos, but you know,
Okay,
however
well,
it's pronounced is cool with me.
yeah,
Uh,
he's never been. I mean, none of these guys have ever been photographed with an expensive watch, and maybe it's
yeah.
just because they're not that kind of guy. Maybe it's because they're more tech and not into mechanical stuff. But speaking to a friend of mine at Hodinkee, another enormously famous watch media that I respect enormously, I have friends there. They sometimes stop by Silicon Valley to have dinners with tech giants and all that, and like talk about watches, and because they're the go-to guys for watch stuff in the US and in a lot of places all over the world actually. They have seen a lot of growing interest in the tech sector on that kind of mechanical watches, and because I guess if you've got a nerd brain, like
Mm.
a nerd stuff like mechanical watchmaking, not necessarily for the prestige value, but for the mechanical side of it, for the actual how things work kind of thing. I think that tickles something in them, the same way that coding would, or development would, or you know, just tech developments in a sense would. Because you think about it,
That's a
watchmaking, micromechanics, it's the original computer.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, no, precisely. I 100% agree. I wrote a story a couple of years ago about why Patek and Philippe were the original Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. You know, one
Yeah.
very mechanical minded, engineering minded guy, and the other one who was a sort of master of
Mm-hmm.
marketing and salesmanship and spruiking a product. But you know, I do wonder whether, you know, and I've been hearing across a lot of fields, whether it's clothing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's shoes, whether it's wine, a lot of these things that are to a big extent about, you know, creating an impressive appearance, outward appearance when you
Mm-hmm.
venture out into the world. And you know, it's buying cars, it's all of these sorts of things. Um, the sales have really, you know, gone down over the last few months
Yes.
because, you know, I think in America, months from February to March, sales
Mm-hmm.
of clothing in general went down by about 60% because people just
Mm-hmm.
went, "Why do I need new clothes? I'm not going outside.
Exactly.
I'm staying home." And it's a similar sort of, you know, people weren't, while we were at home, buying really impressive bottles of wine because it was like, well, why
Mm-hmm.
do I need to have that bottle that sits on the table and looks, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
serves out a symbol. So yeah, I think it's inevitable that the same kind of thing has had something to do with the decreases of sales of watches over the last few months. That
There's of course like a few compounding factors. I mean, when you think about things like cars and all that, a lot of it is dependent on import and how things can travel through like all over the world. And if shipments are blocked, if traffic is down, if imports are down, and if demand is down at the same time, then that kind of, it's the same. It's because of the same situation, but there are compounding factors that kind of drive up the like a there was supposed to be obviously a lot of launches in like 3 months ago during the Watches and Wonders and Basel period, and a lot of stuff wasn't just available to go. Like even just the watches weren't actually ready because suppliers had closed down, factories had stopped supplying, and people weren't getting their parts and their components in time to actually complete their watches, even if they were in their workshops or at their watchmaker's bench, like putting stuff together. Things weren't being sent to them.
mm,
Things weren't ready. I do know some people who were just at home getting a bit cabin fever crazy and shopping like mad.
Yeah.
And the situation in China that we referred to earlier, where things opened up again and people just went crazy buying, it was also a lot of pent up demand over there because you've seen a lot reported about this in the papers about what they
Revenge.
call revenge spending.
Yeah.
Exactly. People don't like being cooped up, and when they come out,
Yeah.
they spend with a fury.
Yeah.
And a lot of these were also, when I spoke to some of my boutique contacts in Shanghai and Beijing, some of them were also because they kept in touch with their clients even during lockdown, even though the boutiques and the shops would technically open. A good sales assistant or a really strong sales manager with good contacts with his clients, high net worth guys, would ring them up, say, how are you doing? I know everyone's really depressed, everyone's at home, but we have this amazing piece and, I can arrange for it to be delivered to your place. You can examine it at your own time, take your time with it, take the whole afternoon. We'll pick it up from your house whenever you're ready. And some people did business that way. They would accept orders from homes over like a WeChat or over like just the China's messaging system. And
Yeah.
when the boutiques opened again, all those orders started being recorded, and it created this amazing leap in terms of figures because it all compounded. And
But
I
what?
don't want to say in general that there's things are one way or like people aren't buying when they're shut down or like people are buying more, but I think it varies from place to place and obviously from person to person.
Yeah. No, I think watch companies have been, in general, though there are some outliers who have really embraced e-commerce, but from the commentary I've been reading has been pointing out that one of the things that really hit the demand side as opposed to the supply side, as you point out, the supply chain hugely interrupted, and
Yes.
factories, workshops, ateliers, etc., having to shut down. All of that, had a huge effect on supply. But then from the demand side, or just the ability, the distribution side, it's impossible still to buy, many higher end timepieces online, unless you're in the secondary market. And
No.
do you think it's going to cause a reappraisal of that kind of resistance to e-commerce? It would seem to me to make sense, despite what watch companies say about how much they love their authorized dealers, that if they were to go direct to consumer, they could perhaps provide, either increase their margins or provide a more favorable and more attractive prices to consumers.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because for years, and you know this and I know this because we've heard it 1,000 times, that luxury brands and luxury companies have been saying that we don't really want to get online because, the values of digital and online are not necessarily compatible with luxury. We're selling longevity, we're selling classic, we're selling something intimate. And to them, the online sphere just didn't represent any of those things. And we saw very quickly when the lockdown situation happened in various markets all over the world that they were forced to change their tune. And nothing's changed about how the online sphere works. It's still very much about, that instantaneous hit. It's still very ephemeral. Things don't really last very long in terms of content online. But I think retailers and sellers and creators and brands have had to kind of adapt themselves around that, where they had no other choice than to interact with their communities online, to sell their stuff online. And we saw this when, it was big news like a few months ago that Patek Philippe had finally allowed their partners, retailers, to place Patek Philippe products on their e-commerce platforms. That was huge for a lot of us. It was huge news. It was kind of the sign that, okay, maybe things are starting to change. People don't have that kind of snobbery associated with putting their products online anymore. And people are seeing that maybe it's true. Maybe online is still not the best frame or the best environment for luxury products. Nothing beats being there in person to actually hold a watch in your hand. But you can't deny that online is currently now the best channel to reach your customers. And it may not be the right place for your products, but it's definitely the right place for your customers. And brands that focus purely on their products without really thinking about their customers won't last very long in this century, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Because
you
you
know,
used to be able to do that. You used to be able to do that. You just used to be, if we build it, they will come, that whole kind of thing. But
yeah.
I feel that in the 21st century, that kind of product-centric, like purely product-centric approach can be a bit indulgent. How do you feel?
Yeah. You know, look, as you say, there's no substitute for touch and feel, and for, whether it's in human relationships, or whether it's in looking at a product, there's no substitute for that. And it was, you know, we both remember only sort of 10 years ago that people were saying no one's ever going to buy, you know, a $10,000 or a $20,000 watch or whatever online without seeing it, without putting it on their wrist and getting a feel for it. And that's been proven over and over to be false. And I think the ultimate proof comes in a situation like you're in today, where because of the current crisis, a lot of the bidders there are going to be people who've never seen, have only seen on the Phillips website the lots that they're bidding on, and bidding. You know what? There's probably going to be some stuff there that's right up there in the high six figures, or
Yeah,
maybe
the star piece,
figures.
the estimates of the star piece is between 800 grand and 1,600,000 Swiss francs. So, you know, not
Okay,
small potatoes, let's put it that way.
yeah. And if you're willing to stump up for that, without actually having seen it, then you know that's saying something, huh?
Yeah. And I think we have to be clear, it's not necessarily like a completely sight unseen, because the people buying this watch, they may not have touched and felt and experienced this watch in person, but they've had plenty of experience with watches just like this one. So they,
Hmm.
even though they haven't held the watch in their hands, they kind of know what they're getting. It's like,
Hmm.
and they know what it is, and they're buying it online. That's all it is. It's kind of like what you do when you go buy a Tesla. You don't buy at the Tesla, you don't buy your car at the Tesla showroom. You look at it, you kind of drive around in it, you feel it. You go home, you might think about it for a few months, you might test drive a few other things, but in the end, you purchase your Tesla via the platform,
Yeah,
and they bring it to
absolutely.
you.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily want to tell people out there that people bidding in watch auctions or buying watches online are doing them sight unseen, because these
yeah,
are people who already kind of know what they're buying, and it's just
yeah.
that the final transaction or the final purchase, that final click is with their mouse or with a digital signature online. But you know, they're not fools, and they definitely know what they're buying. So, and it's not that online is going to replace physical sales, like brick and mortar establishments. They're complementary, and they ought to work together, as we've been saying they should all along.
Precisely. Look, Suzanne, I'm going to let you go off and enjoy. Hopefully, they got some champagne for you. Have some champagne for
Thanks.
breakfast and all that thing. But the very
I got to check out some of these watches.
well, that's right. You got to do that too. But I find that it adds sparkle to have a nice sparkling wine along with it. The final thing I would ask you though,
Yes.
is a double-sided question. So, um, what is the timepiece that if someone was wearing it, you would immediately say, talk to the hand, not to the face, and walk away from that conversation and say, this person isn't worth my time? And what is the timepiece that conversely would make you say, this is a man of taste and distinction and discernment, and is worthy of sparking a conversation with him in this social environment?
So in response to that, I'm actually going to give you some anecdotes,
Okay,
because
okay.
no, because saying that I wouldn't speak to someone because of the watch he's wearing is like kind of like saying that I wouldn't talk to Bill Gates. I wouldn't give Bill Gates my time because he's wearing a Casio, and that would obviously be absurd.
But no,
You
no,
know,
but I've seen it like that. Like, and you know, and I don't think you can judge someone on a Casio. But as Sumet says, or a woman for that matter, a woman for that.
yes, we are in the
Um,
21st century. Let's not forget that. Thank you, Sim, for the
yeah,
reminder.
it's not binary here. We're just talking about judging a person of whatever nature they may be, purely on their possessions, which I find. Oh, I'm kidding. Um, okay, go on, please.
But on the flip side, I have, like, rather embarrassingly, gone up to someone like in a restaurant once because I noticed that he was wearing something really fine and really nice, and it was a vintage royal oak, and I just said to him, oh, that's really beautiful. Like you normally wouldn't approach someone like that, but it was just someone at a sushi bar, just like kind of just sitting there on his own. So I just like kind of like, that's really nice, by the way. And he didn't know the least thing about it. It was a gift. So, it just kind of backfires on me in that way as well. So my approach always is, and I can't help it because I'm in this job, it's an occupational hazard. If I go up to someone, I will immediately notice what they've got on their wrist. But I feel that the subsequent conversation should always be able to kind of like change your mind about it, because it's really possible that the watch either like he or she's wearing it because it's a gift, or it's got a sentimental value, like or yeah, it's just not something that's part of their worldview, or even something that they've considered in a sense. And but obviously, if you do connect with someone and you strike up a good conversation, you think like, this person's really, I'm into this conversation. I really appreciate this person and what they're telling me, and then maybe that's the time to share about what really matters to you, and that's cool what we're talking about. I want to tell you what I'm really into, and maybe kind of share in that sense, because closing yourself off to people who are wearing the wrong watch kind of deprives you of the opportunity to convert someone. I don't like to use that word, but that's exactly what it is, to kind of turn them around to your point of view, to make them maybe understand something that they didn't before, to make them appreciate something that they didn't really even think about before. And I think no, basically looking at someone's wrist and saying, no, I'm not into that, or like, oh my God, I'm totally going to be best friends with this guy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick that approach, because it shuts you off from being able to share things with people, in a sense that might bring new people into the fold of mechanical watch appreciation. And I'm going to turn
It's
that
not,
back on you now, because you're obviously the guy when it comes to fashion and dress sense, and like the most dapper guy in Singapore. Is there someone who's wearing something that would cause you to say, not going there?
no, and I think,
And pretty much for the same reason, right?
I also want to
Because
say,
you could
I
turn it
think
around.
it's a really valid point you make about, that something, we think of stuff, particularly for guys, as things like watches and cars are sort of an outward expression of their personality. But as you say, it could be a gift, or it could be something that's for practicality's sake, or whatever. And you're absolutely right that you can't be judged on these things, as with those, the Bill Gates of the world, who choose to wear a Casio or a Swatch, or whatever
Yeah.
it may be.
It's
It
just
makes
one
a lot.
last little factoid. Some of the best, most talented, most respected watchmakers I know don't wear a watch. How about that?
Yeah, I've hardly worn one over the whole period of the lockdown, because I don't know, it feels more comfortable to knock around the house without it. But there we are. Some people have called me a heretic for doing so, but I don't know. I prefer not to have metal stuff on my skin. Maybe I was a slave in a previous life or something. I don't know. But who
Well, you're
knows?
Australian, so I'm not gonna
Yeah,
do the
yes,
obvious. I'm not gonna do the
yeah.
obvious joke.
We're not all descended from convicts, though I very likely am. So there we are.
I
There we
understand.
are. Yeah. Like, it's been a great pleasure talking with you, Suzanne. I'm going to let you go off and do your thing. But happy birthday once again, and I do thank you for making time on this special and momentous occasion of the birthday of
Well, no,
Phillips.
thank you for putting up with the late stuff and all the slight logistical problems that we faced this morning. And
Not a,
take care, Christian, and hope to see you when I'm back in Singapore. Catch you soon.
yes, absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks
Ciao,
everyone for joining.
Zizi.
Till next time. Ciao, ciao.